Good morning. Nice and loud. Hey, Brian? I'll back up. Okay. We're going to get going here. We're almost 5 minutes late, and I just got on the microphone, so we're going to try and play a little bit of catch up. The session this morning that I organized is called Sustainable Pathways. My goal for organizing this session was to showcase some of the amazing things that we're doing here in the Yukon and the partnerships that have been formed, and that how sort of the world is our oyster in terms of thinking about and engineering things that we can do that support true economic reconciliation and those meaningful partnerships that are more than just a percentage off the top model, which has been historically the model that was used, and I think we all need to start somewhere, but this is sort of an open challenge for companies to be inspired and think about doing a bit more. I'm very pleased for today's session. I'll give you a quick overview. So we're going to do a little introduction, and then we have a session presentation by Crystal Smith, followed by 2 panels, and then a quick closing. In this morning's session, there was a land acknowledgement. I'm not going to repeat the land acknowledgement, but I am going to talk about a little bit about why land acknowledgements are important and challenge you to think about the why behind it. So why we bother saying it and what it actually means. And I think that's the important piece so that it's not just lip service. And so I live here. I own a business here. I'm raising my family here. I've got a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old. And I'm truly passionate about the work that we do in the territory. I also think it's really cool when you see other Yukoners at the CGC with their kids. And they're all part of this community and this industry as well. So with that, I'm pleased to introduce Crystal Smith. Crystal served the Haisla Nation for 12 years, including 8 as Chief Counselor from 2017 to 2025, leading a transformative shift from managing poverty to managing opportunity, success, and independence. She's recognized nationally for advancing Indigenous economic self-determination through projects that balance prosperity with environmental stewardship. Under her leadership, the Haisla Nation played a central role in LNG Canada, launching High Sea Marine, the world's first fully electric tugboat fleet, and secured the $6 billion Cedar LNG project, the largest Indigenous-led infrastructure investment in Canadian history. These ventures have enabled the nation to fund programs independently and create lasting benefits for future generations. Crystal is a former chair of the First Nations Natural Gas Alliance, a former director of the First Nation Climate Initiative, a board director at Taseko Mines and Snowline Gold, and is a member of TC Energy and the Major Projects Office Indigenous Advisory Council. Her achievements have earned her Business Woman of the Year, Public Policy Forum honoree, Energy Person of the Year, and the King Charles III Coronation Medal. A proud mother, grandmother, and athlete, Crystal remains deeply connected to her community while championing Indigenous leadership and economic reconciliation across Canada. Please join me in welcoming Crystal.
Good morning, everyone. It is absolutely amazing to be back here. I got in last night. I was here last September, and I was telling the Snowline board and a few of the people that we met with this morning that I came here in September, and I stepped off the plane and thought, whoa, it is cold here. So I'm from northern BC, which is, I thought was cold, but apparently is not cold. And so as I prepared to come here this week, I thought I am going to come very prepared. I have a long jacket, I've got my toque, and I thought, okay, I'm good, because I walked from the hotel to here last year just to kind of get a feel of what Whitehorse is. But I kind of got the shoes wrong this time. So my next trip, if it's from September on, I will get it right, because I do have proper winter attire. So Thank you for the invitation to speak here today with industry leaders, project developers, and partners who shape major economic activity in this country. Today's discussion is just not about Indigenous participation. It's about the reality that Indigenous economic self-determination has become one of the most important drivers of project success, investment certainty, and long-term operational stability in Canada. To illustrate that, I want to share the Haisla Nation's journey through LNG development, a real on-the-ground example of what's possible when Indigenous nations and industry work differently. This is a story about partnerships that work, decisions that are grounded in community, and major projects that proceed because Indigenous nations are leaders, not spectators. Across Canada, every major project exists within the rights and title and territories of Indigenous nations. The industry landscape has fundamentally changed. Indigenous nations are governing with increasing authority. They are sophisticated economic actors. They are equity partners in energy, mining, infrastructure, and utilities. They have their own environmental standards and land use plans. They expect and deserve a government-to-government relationship. And for industry, this is not a risk. It is a pathway to certainty. Projects that align with Indigenous self-determination move faster, face fewer legal challenges, have stronger social license, operate more sustainably, deliver long-term workforce stability, and maintain regional support for decades, not just during construction. The Haisla LNG story demonstrates this clearly. In the early 2000s, Haisla Nation, like many communities, was rebuilding capacity, improving governance systems, investing in training and workforce development, negotiating early, small-scale resource agreements, working through burdensome federal administration, strengthening community engagement processes. Industry didn't always see this work, but it formed the foundation that allowed our nation to become a dependable, capable, solutions-oriented partner later in major projects. The lesson for industry is this: strong Indigenous governance creates strong industry partnerships. As global LNG markets expanded, British Columbia's northwest coast became a strategic location. Companies arrived with proposals, business plans, and timelines. At this moment, Haisla Nation made a critical decision. We would not react to development, we would lead it. We came forward with our own land use vision, environmental conditions, clear economic priorities, governance structures, and a readiness to negotiate as a government. For industry, this changed the dynamic. Instead of uncertainty, there was clarity. Instead of resistance, there was clear expectations. This approach established a new standard for collaboration. In 2009, we signed our first impact benefit agreement. For the nation, it was a step toward economic stability. For industry, it was proof that Indigenous nations can negotiate effectively, deliver on commitments, manage revenue responsibly, support regulatory processes, and work constructively with project proponents. From the industry perspective, this created predictable engagement, efficient permitting, and a secure long-term relationship. It built the trust required for the next phase. LNG Canada was not business as usual. Haisla Nation approached the project with the same level of discipline and planning as any government or corporate partner. We aligned with industry on environmental monitoring and oversight, permitting timelines, emergency response planning, workforce and procurement targets, long-term operational agreements, culturally informed land use decisions, and risk management. And here's what industry gained from this approach. 1, predictability and clarity. Our governance structure gave companies clear decision-making lines with community engagement built into the process. 2, reduce conflict and litigation risk. With nation-level alignment, the project advanced with fewer delays. 3, workforce advantages. A local trained Indigenous workforce is a competitive advantage in remote project development. 4, social license. Approval that the host nation strengthened the project's national and international credibility. 5, long-term partnership. Haisla was just not a signatory, we became a committed partner in seeing the project succeed. Cedar LNG represents something transformational for industry. I always get goosebumps when I say this. An Indigenous majority-owned LNG project. This model demonstrates what the future of major development in Canada looks like. 1, Indigenous nations as equity partners. Ownership aligns interests, it reduces friction, increases cooperation, and ensures that long-term success is shared. 2, ESG credibility that cannot be manufactured. Investors, regulators, and markets look for Indigenous leadership in major energy projects. Cedar LNG carries environmental and social legitimacy that industry alone cannot create. 3, local stability. When the host nation owns the project, regional support is embedded. Conflict is replaced with alignment. 4, long-term revenue models. Decades of income for the nation means decades of stability for the project. 5, innovation in regulatory and environmental design. Cedar LNG's floating infrastructure and emissions profile reflect the environmental standards Indigenous nations bring to the table. Cedar LNG is not only a milestone for Haisla Nation, it is a case study on what industry can achieve when Indigenous leadership is equal, empowered, and invested. For industry partners, one of the most important factors often happens behind the scenes: community engagement. Haisla Nation undertook open consultation, transparent information sharing, community meetings, elder discussions, youth involvement, leadership accountability, and ongoing communication throughout the development. This internal mandate is what gives a project durability. A nation that is divided will bring instability. A nation that is informed will bring endurance. Industry benefits most when Indigenous nations have a legitimate, community-backed decision-making process and when proponents respect it. What economic self-determination has achieved and why it benefits industry. 1, a stronger local infrastructure, better roads, housing, community services, support project operation, and worker well-being. A trained and reliable workforce. Haisla members contribute across construction operations, environmental management, marine roles, and administration. 3, stable governance partners. A nation with strong systems is a nation industry can depend on. 4, long-term alignment. When the nation's economic well-being is tied to the project, everyone works towards long-term operational success. 5, reduced regulatory friction. Indigenous support strengthens environmental approvals and streamlines permitting. 6, regional economic uplift. Local businesses grow, procurement expands, and economic activity increases, all of which stabilizes the project environment. This is why Indigenous self-economic determination is not only good for Indigenous communities, it's strategically advantageous for industry. Based on the Haisla experience, here are practical insights for companies working in Canada today. 1, engage early, long before the project design. Indigenous nations want to shape the project, not react to it. 2, treat nations as governments, not as stakeholders. It changes the entire quality of the relationship. 3, bring equity opportunities to the table. Ownership aligns interests and reduces risk. 4, respect Indigenous land use plans and environmental priorities. They are sophisticated, data-driven, and grounded in stewardship. 5, build long-term relationships beyond the project cycle. Trust cannot be built once, it must be maintained. 6, invest in training and capacity. A strong local workforce benefits everyone. 7, recognize community processes. A project is only as strong as the support it has from the nation's citizens. We are entering a new era in which equity partnerships become standard. Nations lead in environmental oversight. Indigenous monitoring becomes integral to project operations. Nations bring economic and technical expertise to the table. Major projects are co-designed, co-stewarded, and co-owned. Sustainable development depends on Indigenous support. Indigenous nations are shaping Canada's economic landscape. For industry, the nations that host your projects are not just neighbors. They are your most important long-term partners. Haisla Nation's LNG journey proves what's possible when that partnership is built on respect, shared opportunity, and leadership on both sides. In closing, to every industry leader in this room, the question is not whether Indigenous nations will play a central role in development. We already do. The question is, will your company help build the next generation of partnerships? Partnerships based on equity, certainty, and mutual success. Haisla Nation chose a leadership role in LNG. We chose ownership, not observation. We chose collaboration, not conflict. And those choices have created stability and opportunity for everyone involved. This is the model, this is the future, and it is a future we can build together. Thank you.
Thanks, Crystal. We didn't talk about questions, so I'm not going to spring that. Okay, we'll give a brief minute for questions if there are any.
What was your attraction to join Snowline at the board level?
Which company do you work for? It was a few of the first conversations that I had. I've been, so 12 years as a part of our leadership. I saw a lot of companies and proponents come in, existing operations within our territory. And for Indigenous people in the room, I think we have a really good, excuse my language, bullshit meter. You can tell when people aren't being genuine, and I think that kind of that part of my growth within our leadership developed quite quickly. My first interactions with Snowline, very, very willing and open to have conversations. I've known Sarah for quite a few years, and having conversations where you're constantly bringing Indigenous perspectives and wanting to learn. I think it's the flexibility of their true genuineness of wanting to be partnerships with the local Indigenous communities that really sparked. I think I responded even before they formally asked me to be a part of their board, that I would be all in to help support with bringing my knowledge to the table, where we can be creative for that Indigenous involvement.
Thank you.
I saw you speak in Prince George, Crystal, and you had a prepared text and said, I don't want to do this, I want to speak from my heart. And what you said today really resonated, and it was very important. But tell us from your heart, the way you did in Prince George at the Natural Resources Forum, how this has impacted you and the Haisla people.
Thank you, and thank you, Sarah, for that opportunity in Prince George. I think it was one of the first keynotes, and what he's talking about is all the boards that I chaired as a part of our leadership. I had many communications teams, and I'd asked them, please come together and put together something that's, appropriate from all perspectives, from the Alliance, from the nation, and from First Nations Climate Initiative. And by the end of them collaborating, I think it was like a 30-page, very technical speech. And I thought, this is great work. And I told the team, I really appreciate you guys taking the time, but I can't read this. I can't. So I was about an hour away from the keynote, and I took my laptop into a separate room, myself and our CEO at the time, and I was trying, I'm shaking, but I was shaking more back then, thinking, what am I going to speak about? And the CEO and I had a really great relationship at the time, friendship, and I started talking about, we have all these people speaking on behalf of Indigenous communities about what all of our communities face: managing poverty, suicides, drug and alcohol addictions, but with no resources. And I thought, nobody's ever come forward to actually tell their experience. And I had gone to the forum because I was sitting at what my team called the big kids table with CEOs from BC Hydro and Rio Tinto. And I was dressed in my suit and jacket and dressing the part. And I told my team, this isn't even me. Normally you'll find me with my hair up, which most people don't recognize me when you see me in airports. And I wear a pair of Lululemons and a sweatshirt and runners. Yeah, yeah. So at lunchtime, I went back to my hotel and I changed. And I got my Lulus and I got my sweater on. And when I went back to the table, the CEO of Chris O'Reilly of BC Hydro kind of looked at me strange, and I said, "It's me, Crystal." And he was like, "Oh, okay." But I went up and I spoke from the heart about what it was like growing up in my community. I was born in 1979. I have an identical twin sister. We grew up in the waterfront where I could see Rio Tinto, where I could see Uricane, where I could see Methanex. But also walking to basketball practice, I could see our band office up behind my house on a hill. And I thought, I'm gonna end up there, and I'm not by any means, I respect every person and what you do and what you contribute to organizations, regardless of what title you wear. But I thought I'm gonna be a janitor or front desk receptionist. Those are my reality. I'm not gonna work in industry. But very limited. I grew up in poverty. I grew up with my grandparents raised me and my sister. But we never knew that we grew up in poverty because my grandparents did such an amazing job to continuously put food on the table with our traditional harvesting. But my stepfather was the only stable income year round. Didn't depend on fishing or any other industry where it was for a certain time of the year. But as we were, there were no resources in our community. The band office provided its regular, its status quo program delivery. Nothing that was meant to fit the needs of our people, nothing cultural, nothing language oriented. Very INAC, Indigenous, I think I don't even know what they're called anymore. Back then it was Indian Affairs. Nothing outside of the parameters of what their policy dictated to us. And as we moved, Ellis Ross became our chief counselor. And before becoming a part of our leadership, I was actually the executive assistant starting in 2009 to 2011. And I went back to school for a year. I took a year off, and when I came back, he was the most popular person. All of these requests coming in for him to speak at different engagements, and I thought, why do people want to listen to you? And if you know Ellis, I hope you get that. But I asked him if I could go with him one day to listen to him speak, and he spoke from the heart. He talked about the realities of our community and how the shift in our leadership needed to transform, as opposed to fighting government, aligning ourselves with government and seeing what we could do to participate in the economy. And I thought, I want to be a part of this. I am as a support, but I want to be a part of the decision making, to say that I was there when our nation started to move forward with a different mindset. And in hearing him talk about the realities of our community, and when I say I grew up in poverty, I've hit every statistic of being Indigenous. Growing up in poverty, witnessing alcohol abuse, witnessing violence in the home, sexual abuse, physical abuse. But in 2013, the father of my girls died by suicide. Sorry. Our nation hadn't progressed to the point of having program delivery that could have saved us. And in 2000, it was the first year that I was elected as a part of our leadership. And in 2017, when I was elected as the chief counselor, it was my purpose to ensure that no community, no family in my community would have to endure what my girls and I have. And that the only way that we could do that, no level of government's going to come save our communities. No level of government's going to save anybody. And our only way to actually advance and start healing our people from intergenerational trauma is through economic development and being able to use that as a catalyst to develop new programs and services that actually meet the needs of our people and help that shift that narrative of a change in our communities where our people are strong in our culture, strong in our identities, strong in our languages, and are past the intergenerational impacts.